This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Karen Evers. You're a you're a person that loves HR, loves business. You work with fractional HR execs and SMBs. Welcome to the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
So, a couple of questions we ask of any guest before we get to the heart of your story is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me? I am motivated to, believe it or not, I don't have hobbies. I'm motivated by making business better. I love business. I'm a junkie about business, and I am incredibly motivated by that. People do ask me what I do in my free time, and quite honestly, it's really hard to stay away from work because I like it too much. So that's definitely my motivation, and it always has been. I'm a little bit of a work addict.
Well, it's good to be passionate about what you're into because I think that kind of it shows like when people work with people who are passionate about the career that they're in or the gig that they've chosen to do.
Sure.
It's it just feels authentic when it doesn't feel like somebody's phoning it in.
Well,
So it's
there's
cool
never
that
there's never been a day I did that.
well, that's cool. That's really cool because that's surprising because a lot of people like I'm in the arts, but I'm also in business. I'm a software guy
Mhm.
as my day job. I'm an artist, I'm a musician, podcaster.
Mm.
So I kind of use the left right brain, but
Yeah.
I've dealt with a lot of people who are like they get burned out in the corporate world and they want to go all the way into the arts, and they kind of don't see a way to be happy in the other place. So
Mhm.
it's cool that you actually found happiness in it. I found happiness because I figured out how much work I should do. I kind of divide my time between the arts and
Yeah.
then my and then my day job. But like
Mhm.
it's cool if you actually know exactly what you want to do. So like when you were going on this journey, did you immediately like when you were going to college know that you wanted to be a business professional?
So that's a great question. I started out, my mother was a therapist and she was doing EAP therapy in a large manufacturing plant in my hometown. And she was really had a great partnership with the HR manager there. And so, we were getting towards the end of high school and trying to figure out, what should be my major in college and what might be interesting to me. And so I did some shadowing with him and that was pretty interesting. And so that was my major in college, started out as human resources. And then we had a little bit of a detour because I ended up being the president-elect of a large student chapter of the largest HR association in the world. And president-elects needed to go to the national conference, and it was in Orlando that year, and it's like hundreds of thousands of people. It's gigantic. And I went and I was so um, disenchanted by everything that I was seeing, learning, speakers, topics, anything. It wasn't at all what I wanted to do for the next 40, 50 years of my life. And so I pretty much said, nope, HR is out, not going to do it. I got to figure out something else. Don't know what it is, but I got to do something else. And so I literally went back to Tucson. I was at U of A in Tucson, Arizona. And I went back to Tucson and I gave up the presidency, gave it to somebody else in the chapter. I changed my major and thought I'm done in HR. And so I ended up graduating with a major in communication and a minor in Spanish. And, listen, it served me well. But as an undergrad, just a fresh graduate, I needed a job. And the universe put the executive recruiting on my plate. And that was like one of the first jobs that was out there. And I said, okay, I guess we're going to do this. And the really good news is that very early on in my career, I had some amazing, amazing mentors as bosses who felt like HR was something much more than the box checking, bureaucratic, kind of paper pushing kind of HR and rule abiding kind of HR that a lot of people think of when they think of HR.
Mhm.
And so it was to them much more of a business function and much more about that marrying and that intersection of people and business. And they were able to show me, the big picture of business very early on. Um, and I just got hooked immediately. And ever since then, I mean, HR is predominantly the only thing I've done in my career, but it's always been through the lens of making businesses better. And so, like, I just got off the phone with a client of mine who, he's trying to figure out how to help people work together better. And some of them aren't even employees and creating those partnerships. And it's not even HR stuff, but I'm going to go facilitate a session for him next week because I get his problem and I know how to navigate personalities and I know how to communicate. And so, and I understand his vision for what he's trying to get to. And so, I said, listen, we can bring in a business coach or a facilitator, but I think we can manage this. And he's like, Karen, I trust you, just go do it. Right. And so it's that sort of thing where it's like it's not all about payroll and
Yeah,
benefits and all those things, right? The technicalities of HR, yes, I
yeah.
oversee those things. I get it, but it's so much more than that.
Well, it seems like you're thinking more out of the box.
Yeah,
I in the world of like artists, we kind of our secret sauce is thinking out of the box.
yeah,
So
totally.
if you're an artist, because like everybody's already done something before, and so your
Yeah,
secret sauce is you.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't get that. They always want to clone. They want to
yeah,
clone things. They want repeatable things.
yeah,
But really, the things that are innovative are the things that are kind of
totally.
cutting edge in terms of your voice, because your
Yes,
voice is the one thing that nobody else has. And
yes.
a lot of
And that's,
times,
yeah,
like, in the world of ideas, like a lot of people like cookie cutter ideas, and then you've
mhm,
got authentic, original
yeah,
thinkers,
yeah.
right?
Well, and
And
that's, I ended up burning out in corporate and realizing that I just really needed a whole nother environment. And I started thinking that maybe that wasn't for, my profession wasn't even for me anymore. Right.
mhm,
And what I realized was once I started doing this and doing it, kind of, I have a team now, but I started out solopreneur style. Like I realized that if I do it my way, that's a huge differentiator. And I am
yeah,
not like everybody else. And I am totally fine with that. I do not want to be in a whole, group of cattle doing it all the same way
well,
at all.
everybody's running the same algorithm. Like
Yep.
that's the problem you see today with the social media
Yeah.
world. Everybody gets on a trend. Like a trend on
Yep.
LinkedIn is to make it like Instagram.
For
And
sure.
I'm like, "Really?" It's like
No,
I'm trying to get a job and you're acting like you're an influencer. It's like, so when did a job site become an influencer site? So the idea, like people jumping on trends, even in our world of IT AI, everybody
hmm
thinks AI is the magic bullet, and they want to use AI for everything, even if that's not the business case. Because I'm a business analyst, and we look at it like
right.
a user story in the business case. Like, does it actually make sense, or are you just jumping on a bandwagon?
Yeah,
A lot of times, yeah, you got to actually come up with what is the problem that it's solving.
for
You
sure.
know, and a lot of times people don't. They like sometimes it's really important for people like yourself to create your own thing. With your company, HumanSmarts, right? That's your idea, right?
Yeah,
And to actually bring that to the world gives your point of view because you immediately went to that conference. "Oh, this is not what I want. This is this is a disconnect." It's kind of like a musician. It's like, do
yeah,
I want to play yacht rock or do I want to do something like the Talking Heads, something
right.
innovative like David Byrne, doing something
Right.
really different?
Classical, right? Like
Yeah,
make your choice, right?
yeah,
And there's a lot of ways to do things. There's not one way. And I think using the diversity of personality and background and culture and where you're at and, kind of how your brain thinks, like it's just, it attracts different people. And I don't expect to be everybody's cup of tea. I think
yeah.
that that is like, and that's totally okay. I am
That's
who I
fine,
am.
right?
If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's totally fine. Let me
Yeah,
introduce you
because
to some of my friends that do some other things. like
Well,
me.
it's like the law of attraction. Like you don't have to be the toolbox that's for everything, right?
No.
Sometimes it's having a niche market. It's kind of like the law of attraction. It's like you put something out in the world, that your tribe finds you
Yeah.
because they say, well, oh, I I heard what this person says and that resonates with me. I'm like in tune with that person. I was like, oh, and then like, you might not be in tune. It might be discordant. It might be noise to you. But
Right.
when people hear it, when they hear it and hear something you're saying or something you put out there, and then they like, wow,
Yeah.
that's like a fresh look. Like that's the whole point of it. Like it doesn't have to speak to everybody, but it will speak to somebody.
Yeah. And those are my people.
Yeah, that's
And
like
there's
that's a
plenty of
hard
them
lesson.
out there, right?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
enough
And there's
enough
plenty of
for
them out there.
everybody
It's all good.
to run a business. Like you don't have to be like the thing that like you're gonna sell like fast food to everybody. Like sometimes there's like a food truck
Yeah.
and people want that food truck, right? And you could always go to the fast food billion sold the place, but the food truck is always going to have that group of people say, "Well, that's the place, right? That's
All
the
day
thing."
long.
And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of mindset that people forget, when they see all these million cat videos on Instagram, and they say, "Well, I'll just make another one." I was like, "Why don't you do something with your own voice?" you know.
True. Yeah.
But so the idea of your company, HumanSmarts, can you tell me more about it? I think you've been implying what it's about, but maybe
Yeah, for sure. So, um, it might help to explain a little bit about how I decided to jump from corporate, because I think that that really formed who wanted my audience to be. So I had spent 25 years in variety of different sizes of corporate environments embedded as predominantly an HR leader. I've been in HR most of the time, but the last 15, 20 years have been predominantly leading the function. And I found that um, the bigger roles that I got, the farther I went in the corporate ladder, and ended up being in larger organizations. And larger organizations are predominantly concerned about risk mitigation and legal because they have a lot at risk. I don't
yeah,
hold anything against them. They
it's
have a
risk
lot at
averse.
risk. I mean, it is what it is. That's the environment they're in because of their size, right? And this last organization was publicly traded. So that adds another level of scrutiny and all kinds of things to it. And so, um, while at first I thought, well, maybe I just need to get another head of HR job in kind of a different environment, I realized that nothing that I was seeing out there was really interesting to me, where it felt like the right next move. And so I decided to pursue something that somebody had put in my brain a couple years before that was putting out my own shingle. And that's kind of scary when you get to a level in corporate where, I was a senior vice president in a publicly traded company. Like
It's
that,
a
those are some
known thing.
serious golden handcuffs and some
Yeah,
serious income. And, to go from that to zero is a lot, right? And so it took some real kind of inner work to get myself there. And fortunately, my husband is a pricing strategist for a living. And so he helped me figure out what I could and couldn't, kind of uh, put out there as a service and pricing and that sort of thing. And I decided to finally make the leap. So that was October 1st, 2022, when I launched HumanSmarts. So what I really knew I wanted to do was work with smaller businesses because I had kind of realized that the bigger businesses were
your
not
cup of tea.
they weren't getting me out of bed in the morning, right? Like because we were having to manage things by legal and risk mitigation instead of doing things that were right for business and humans. And
Like actuaries. Like if you work
and
with
so
actuaries, they're just looking to save the pennies or save the money. Run their algorithms, but it might, unless you're an actuary, you might not find that very
no,
interesting.
right. I came from the insurance world, so I have some awesome actuarial friends. Shout out to them. But that's not me. I live for making businesses better and helping humans find their spot in the world and being happy at their jobs because we all spend way too much time there. And so, I realized that my style of HR was vastly different and that I needed to do the authentic thing. And so I started HumanSmarts thinking I was going to do a lot of the consultative kind of HR, kind of senior executive kind of work. And what I ended up doing is vastly different than that, but it's so much more fulfilling in reality. So when I first launched, I thought I was going to do project work and, maybe some recruiting work, some leadership workshop work, a lot of different kinds of things more on a project basis. And what I met with a colleague of mine that I hadn't talked to in a long time, and she had turned over to the fractional space. And she
Mhm.
was a fractional chief HR officer in Indianapolis. And so I hadn't even heard of the term fractional before. And I said, well, that sounds like fun because you're working with small businesses who can't afford a full-time head of HR. So it's the right
Yeah.
audience.
So
And
you're
so,
spreading yourself across multiple
yeah,
companies
so,
as that role. Like if
right,
you're an actuary for maybe 4 companies, or a
correct,
CFO for 4 companies,
right,
or a CIO for 4. You're
correct.
dividing
So,
your time, right?
yeah. So I realized that I wanted to move out of so much of the traditional consulting project kind of space. And I really thought that this fractional thing was kind of really interesting to me. And so I did that for the first year or so, very solopreneur style. So just me. Didn't want to hire anybody, didn't want to go down that path. I had come from very large environments, seeing all the drama and politics and everything related to big teams. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I think I was just still very burnt out. And then early on this year in 2024, I kind of had this huge epiphany. I don't know if you've ever had one of these life moments where it's like, duh, right? And complete clarity about what you should be doing. And what I realized was that my clients, while I was their fractional chief, they were not handling the rest of the HR stuff well. So they weren't doing payroll well, they weren't doing benefits well, they were not managing compliance very well. They weren't doing some of these other day-to-day things in HR well at all. And by the way, they didn't want to. And it was like this moment of like, so, kind of in a mirror in front of yourself. And it's like, Karen, that's the only thing you've ever done is build and lead HR teams. That's the only thing you've ever done. And you're asking your clients to do it when they're wholly unprepared to do that and they don't want to. And so that was the moment where I was like, okay, I have to build this thing out and do the whole thing for them. So, in essence, my team is a fractional HR team that gets assigned to our client companies. And so they get a fractional chief, fractional generalist, a fractional payroll. Like they get all of the core HR functions kind of on a fractional team basis. And it works really, really well. But I had to get to the point where I was ready to have a team again.
So you're able to find on a fractional basis as kind of understanding the model, it would appear that maybe you don't need somebody to do that 40 hours a week, right? That they actually, I don't know, 10 hours, 15 hours, I
Yeah.
don't know, but that's actually enough to do the work. So
Yeah.
with
Totally.
this model, it's actually not assuming that you have to do the 40-hour work week to get it
No.
done. It's like whatever the workload, it's like work for hire. It's like it is what it is. If you're a
Yeah.
consultant, if it takes 8 hours to do something, it's 8 hours. Doesn't mean I'm going to work 80 hours on it. It's 8 hours.
No. No. Right. And so it's a subscription per employee per month. I have it figured out. And listen, they have all the resources they need. I don't count time all. I I have priced it the way I think it needs to based on the staffing model of how many people that each one of these roles can take. And it's just a fractional basis. And I figured that out. And so it works. My clients are super happy and they get what they need from the right level of service and their employees are supported and it's unlimited. They don't have to think about it again.
So they're able to ramp up if they need to ramp up
Yeah. Yep.
based on
We
whatever
yep.
the
We
workload
look
is, or based
totally
on the like
headcount. So yeah, every quarter we look at headcount, and if it's gone way up, then we adjust to things. But or if it's gone down, right, we adjust to things. But we look at headcount every quarter so that we're, kind of maintaining flexible depending on how much, kind of turn there is in the business or growth or whatever that looks like. And so yeah, and adjust that way. It's
is it
great.
like a global model where you're actually taking people from all over the world, or you're mostly in the US?
US, and I'm not generally doing a lot in New York and California. They have some employment laws that, quite frankly, I don't feel comfortable keeping up with how many that they have and
New
how
York.
many changes all the time that they have. New York, listen, I'm from New York. I love
Yeah,
New
you know,
York, but
I'm a Northeast
but
myself, so
Right. Uh, and the California is beautiful. I have nothing against the states themselves. It's just their employment laws make it really, really hard to do business in them. And I can't, quite frankly, keep up with all the regulation to feel comfortable with all the compliance. So I stay away from those, but I have clients all over the country.
it's interesting you were able to, that your husband helped you with the pricing model,
Yeah.
and then you were able to figure out like what the algorithm is for your work effort, for your
Yep.
planning. But
Yes.
it's interesting that you found a way to kind of get out of the mundane or bureaucracy of what you didn't like about HR, the things you
Yep.
didn't like, and that's always good when people are passionate about something and are willing to actually challenge, like what we call it, like in the arts, is like if you challenge the actual canon,
Yeah.
right? So when
Right.
if you're like
Right.
a jazz guy,
Yep.
Miles Davis, he was the
Yes.
bebop king.
Yep.
Then he went and did fusion. People inside of his canon, they said, jazz is bebop, and if you go
Yeah.
outside of that, it's not jazz. So, but he actually felt like jazz needs something else. So
Yes.
I'll go into fusion, do more experimental. Well, sometimes it's important
Sure.
for somebody who's in it to
Hmm.
actually challenge it, right? And then show where you could actually have like foundational level improvement.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think that because um, I understand business so much that I can straddle that really easily. And so even running this business, right? Like it's kind of fun to, yes, I like the HR part of it too, but I'm loving working on the business. And a lot of my clients are these small businesses. Most of my clients are under 75 employees. And so we're kind of in it together a little bit, and that's kind of fun because they're going through some of the same growing pains that I am, right? And
It's like the
so we're
sweet
kind of
spot.
it is really the sweet spot where they get me, I get them, and we're gonna get through it together, right? So, it's been just such a blast, and I am so blessed.
Yeah, I used to work with a lot of big corporate clients, like big insurance companies,
Yeah,
and then I went with a startup, and I'm actually with a way smaller organization than I used to be with. They used to be a
yeah,
big companies, and I just find it's like the bureaucracy. There's a lot less. If I'm talking to the two founders, like I can get them on the phone, and we can make like changes like right there, like right now. We don't got to go through steering committee, do all this stuff, go through all these levels, and then still not get it right. Like if working with
totally.
the other organizations, like trying to move the Titanic from hitting the iceberg. It's like I
Mhm.
see it coming, but like I can't move fast enough.
Well, and I'm impatient, right? Like, I'm one of these people, like, I wanna see change now. I don't wanna feel like I'm stuck. I don't wanna be in a ditch. I don't wanna be in a rut. I don't wanna do any of those things, and I don't wanna feel like at all stuck in any way. And so I wanna feel like we're having progress, and I wanna feel like when I get up in the morning and when I go to bed at night that I've made a difference and that we've moved the needle. And it is so hard in corporate and anything large to feel like you've moved the needle. And I
Very-
personally, like for my own just satisfaction, I have to know that I moved the needle.
Yeah, because in corporate, sometimes they'll get an idea, but they won't really wholeheartedly be for it, and then it will just get what you're beyond something, you be all gun ho about it, then they
Yep,
drop it. And then
yep,
I'm like, at least if you're with a startup,
yep,
with people who are real passionate about it, you might fail because you failed in the market. right?
Right.
But you were trying your hardest to actually get it done, and you were doing
Yeah.
everything you could, and you weren't kind of getting sabotaged because they really didn't believe it was going to work anyway.
Correct.
That's the
Correct.
problem I had with the corporate. It's like, yeah, they really didn't really believe in this. They were just doing it because they thought they should, but they didn't really want to do it. Versus like you're with the entrepreneurs, like they're passionate because it's like that's their baby. That's what they want to do.
Right. It's
And
so fun. It's so
yeah,
much more fun. I'm
yeah,
having a blast.
yeah. You just feel like you're not phoning it in. It's not just a 9 to 5. You're willing to do the work. You're not thinking
Yes.
about it at
Yes.
work because it's like when you're in your passion thing. It's like if I'm a musician and I'm just sitting there writing, I might be stuck in a writing thing for 2 weeks where I'm working on something, writing this idea, and I just get lost in it because I'm just that passionate about it. And then I just get it done
Yeah.
because I just want to get this thing done.
Yes.
I've talked to like
Yes.
playwrights and painters, and like you can get in this kind of mode
Yeah.
where you got it just comes to you like the muse gave it to you, and then you got to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I believe like entrepreneurs and business people, they have the same thing happens. And I've always tried to
Mm,
equate the creative process that artists do with
yeah.
what business people do. And if you really look at it, there's a lot of things that are very very
Totally.
similar
I mean,
process.
this has been such a creative, iterative process over the last 2 years, and I've had to really do some real thinking about how do I wanna design this? It is kind of creative, like, how am I gonna design this, and how is this gonna work? And, it's all mine, and I get to figure that out, and, that iterative process has actually probably been the biggest learning and the biggest aha for me is that you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah, we figured
I
that in
can
soft.
figure it out along the way in little chunks and, pivot tomorrow to do something different. And God, it's just been so much fun.
In software design. We went from waterfall, which is this
Mhm.
idea we had to have
Yep.
everything in one document,
Yep.
and it
Yep.
could be like 200 pages long. We had to have everything there.
Hmm.
Now we're in the agile world where it's
Correct.
like iterative.
Yep.
We're having scrum
Sprint.
sessions, but it's
Yep.
everything's like, point 1, point 2, point 5, whatever.
Yep.
You
Yep.
can it's not done. If you notice with software, your phone's updating every night. All the apps on it, every day they're updating all the time. Because
Yeah.
with the iterative development, you're never done, right? Every app you have is constantly getting upgraded, like
Correct.
even during the week. You might get
Yep.
multiple updates because we programmers and software guys, we don't know what we don't know. We listen to the feedback, we get lessons learned, and then we fix it.
Hmm. Right.
And then things continually develop in a world where it's like it's not closed. It's not like a closed loop. It's like an open loop.
No,
And
totally
we
open.
continually, and then some people can't get their heads around that. I said, well, when are you going to be done? You're really not done.
Until I retire, I am not done.
Yeah. And that's hard to get your head around. It's like, well, I want something that's got a finite thing. Well, it's kind of the way the world is today. That you never really stop learning till you're not here unless you don't want to learn.
Right.
And things are constantly evolving all the time.
Totally. Yes.
And you can't just stay. Well, you can try to stay in your little area and say, I don't want to be touched by the world, but like the world's going to touch you anyway.
For sure.
But so when you are called in to help an organization, have they found you? Have you pitched to them, or how did they find you?
It's all referral business. So either
Hmm.
that's clients, former clients, people who I'm on board of directors with, people who I worked for in previous lives or worked with in previous lives, or I even have a client who worked for me in a previous life, but she's now an HR director and she needed some help. And so, it's kind of come from all kinds of angles. I have great referral partners as well, employment attorneys and business brokers and there's some professions out there that are great referral partners for me. But it's all referral. I don't do outbound. I suck at outbound. I don't want to do outbound. And I haven't
No
had to do
cold
a lot of
calling.
it.
No,
So that's
no
good.
cold
No,
calling. It's
I've
like so.
never cold called.
So it's like a
Ever.
Rolodex. It's like what I found over
Mhm.
time. you build up this Rolodex of everybody you've
Mhm,
ever worked with, all the
mhm.
people that you interact with, and I
Yeah,
have found out all my work comes from that.
all of
That
it,
yeah, and because that's I've
all of
kind of
it.
dropped the LinkedIn's and the Indeeds of the world.
Mhm, mhm.
All the jobs I've gotten in the last 5 years have been through people I went through my Rolodex and asked them, like, "You need somebody
Yeah,
to do this?" And I've
no
had a lot
question.
better success because the way these algorithms work today, like I said, they're looking for you to be like a influencer. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be an influencer.
No,
I'm
no,
trying to get a job.
yeah, no, totally. I mean, the applications and such, it's really about who you know. Easily the last 3 or 4 of my jobs were in corporate were, um, because of people I knew. And that's plain and simple. And many of my first clients when I started HumanSmarts in 2022 were my former employers and people that I had worked with before. And they knew what I was good at and they knew that I was kind of open for projects and whatever, was going on in HR. And I got a lot of calls from that. And it still rings true today. Like it's not uncommon for once or twice a day to somebody reach out and said, "Hey Karen, I know this person over here that has this issue, right? Is this something that you can help them with?" Of course I can. I'm not going to take stuff that I'm not going to take international. I'm not going to take some things that I don't feel comfortable doing. Unions don't feel comfortable with that. But but I do feel like if I feel like I can help them, I'm going to help them. And that means that I have a really random set of clients, right? So, like, I have a landscaping company, I have architects, I have CPA firms, I have a community college, I have a cosmetics manufacturer, I had two biotech companies, I got investment advisors, insurance brokers, right? Like, all over the map. About what SaaS companies. Like I have I have clients in all kinds of spaces because it's all referral and I suck at saying no. And so if it's something that I could feel like I can do, then I take it and I help them. And so I do have kind of a random set of clients, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It keeps things interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to work because I think some people they get into this repeatable workflow and then everything's always the same. And I think the way you're doing it, there's a lot of chances for you to see things in different industries that like, oh, these things are all like the same, right? And then these things are
Yes.
different. But if
Yes.
you were always doing the same type of client, you
Right.
wouldn't have the chance to see that. It's the
No.
same thing like if you're a music like into music and you're a producer and you're always just getting the same type of people, then your sound just becomes like the same thing. But
Right.
if you're always looking for something different,
Hmm.
then you're willing to evolve. And you could get somebody like a Bowie. Bowie
Yes.
always evolved because he would
Mhm.
get bored and he wouldn't stay in one place. He'd move to
Sure.
another
Yes.
direction. And so,
Yeah.
like, people who are innovative are willing to have things come in their wheelhouse where that's a little, I guess different, but I can handle it. And so I think
Yeah.
if you're willing to kind of deal with the world that's not always the same, go in the forest, it might look the same, but it's not. Start looking into
Uh,
details and things are not the same. Things are
yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
variation, so
For
it's like
sure.
variation is kind of like what it is. It's like if you
Yeah.
get out there and you start to realize that, you can make that your strength that you can handle
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
odd curveball that comes your way because
So
you're not
I
always
had
doing
an
the same
yeah,
thing.
I had an odd curveball, what, 2.5 weeks ago. I'm used to sitting down with small businesses and figuring out talent planning and figuring about out some org structure and figuring out how to manage headcount and salaries and kind of skill sets and all of those things, role clarity for small businesses. Very used to doing that. And most small businesses that are organic, right, they're starting from nothing. And so they have to work up, right, in terms of clients and revenue and all of these kinds of things. And that's 99% of businesses. Until I was introduced to an influencer 2.5 weeks ago who has multi-million followers. And all of a sudden, yes, she's launching kind of a business that's very related to what she does from an influencing perspective, and she has 3 million people that are already lined up pretty much to buy it. And so that's a vastly different kind of how do we hire, right? And what kinds of roles do we need? It's a vastly different thing than an organic business starting from zero who has to do business development and figuring out where their clients are going to come from and where that revenue is going to come from. It's like she already has that. And so that's been my curveball in December, for December, is figuring some of that out. And it's like, ooh, this is kind of fun because I've never worked for a business that had like just built in, like the minute she launches something, it's going to sell. And we have to be ready for it. Like we don't want to be too prepared for it, right? But we don't want to be underprepared for it either and not be able to capture the revenue. So it's I love the curveballs. I love it when somebody comes to me in an industry that I don't know. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's an opportunity because what we find is like, in music, one of the things that you have this idea is like, is there a bad note? Is there such thing as a
Mhm.
bad note, or is it an opportunity to evolve the song?
Correct.
So you see
Yeah.
this like if you're in a jazz band, like a fusion band, and somebody hits a chord that wasn't expected, the band will usually go with the
With
right
it.
note that fit that.
Mhm.
If you're in a band that's used to doing a set piece, if you, for example, if you're an orchestra playing Chopin and somebody does a note that's not expected, then you did it wrong. You did it wrong. There's no way to evolve that. You did it
Yeah.
the wrong way. But if
Right.
you're in the other type of thing, there's a lot more
Mhm.
room to like
Totally.
change the song. So
Yes.
that's why some people were like, I was dealing with a classical musician and tried to get him into a jazz outfit, and they kept on asking, like, where the song was going,
Doesn't work.
and we were like, we don't know where it's going. We just kind of go where how we feel at the moment. You were like, they couldn't get it. They couldn't figure it out because they like it's not the way they're trained. They're trained to read
Yeah.
off the sheet,
Yeah.
and they're really good, and they can
Yeah.
be evocative, and they can kind of work with what's in the sheet, but they're still trained to do what's on the sheet.
Yeah.
They can't really go outside the sheet that much. So I'm like, wow, that was a learning experience for me.
Mm. I think it's taken some time for me because I'm gonna be honest, I was a classical pianist doing Chopin when I was a kid. And I had a really hard time when anybody asked me to do anything improvisational. I just really had a hard time with that because I was trained classical. And so I think it's taken me, I'm 48, right? I think it's taken some maturity and some, confidence and some realizing that what I do authentically is okay and that it's all right to kind of color outside the lines. And so now I'm coloring outside the lines more than I'm coloring inside of the box, which is so
Yeah,
fun.
it's
But it is
cool.
an evolution because I can relate to the classical Chopin.
Yeah, I think it's like, you get trained. I was trained on the clarinet from kind
Hmm.
of sheet reading and doing classical stuff, but then I found limitations, and I just
Yeah,
wanted and the stuff I listened to was like punk and new wave and progressive rock and
yeah,
jazz, and I'm like, I kind of was like, I see where I could go and be like an orchestral musician, but I just like, well, really, my heart pulls toward this other stuff,
yes,
and I just felt like it felt like gave myself the permission structure that it's okay, right? And sometimes it's hard because like wherever you are in life, you might not give yourself the permission to think it's good to go down this path or that path.
correct,
So you get
correct.
locked into like a loop of what
Yeah.
you think you're supposed to do
Well,
until you
and I think
find
that
out
that
where you.
happens in corporate too. I mean, it's the same thing as in corporate, right? You have to color inside the box or you are going to be left behind in corporate and you have to do the rules the way they want them to. And so and and through that I lost myself, right? Because I couldn't color out the side lines and I couldn't be authentic, Karen, and I couldn't, kind of manage things the way I wanted to. And so it's very similar. And so it's really freeing to play something other than Chopin.
Yeah, I think it's cool when people realize that a lot of times they're the one that's stopping themselves from doing it. Like nobody actually told them they couldn't. In some
Yeah.
cases, like your mind has put you in like you could walk out the door,
Sure.
right? But walking out the door is a whole nother thing. It's like I think a lot of times I talk about this is like the idea of safety. You could be in a place that you really don't like, but there's a safety in getting that paycheck,
Yes.
right? There's a safety in like knowing that that's what it's going to be. But the unsafe thing is like, well, if I go out and try to be an entrepreneur, I don't know when my next paycheck is going to come. I don't know if I'm going to be successful. Although I don't know, start adding up, and then you got to build yourself like that confidence to
Uh,
like pull the trigger and know
yes.
like you might not be successful off the bat. You might have it might be a little bit of a struggle. You might be tipping into the deep end. You're not going to drown,
Mm,
but you're tipping into it a little bit. So
yeah.
a lot of people like the safety of not doing it and phoning it in might be okay for a moment.
Yeah. It's just at some point, if you have any authenticity or about really your why and why you get out of bed in the morning, right? Your purpose for things, that's going to go against anything that you're coloring in the lines for if you're not getting what you need in that. And some people can tolerate that better than I can. I couldn't last like that.
Yeah, I think eventually you hit the wall. Like you hit the wall when people are like if they don't take like you keep on throwing ideas out and nobody takes them.
For sure.
And then like if you're somebody that's like a very creative, and then you start realizing I'm a square peg in the round hole. It's like they're not seeing anything I'm doing.
Right.
And eventually it's like you want to be heard. I think people
Yeah.
want, I think it's like what this idea like, well, people first is like, what does that mean? Does that mean you're actually going to listen to the people on the floor if they come up with an idea and they say, hey, you engineers designed this, but it really doesn't work. And the guy putting it together is like, hey, there's a better way to do this. But he goes like, oh, I'm an engineer, so I can't listen to somebody on the floor. So I'm not even going to listen to that because no way, he doesn't have my MBA, doesn't have my degree, didn't go to
Mm,
Carnegie Mellon, so I'm not going to listen to him. you know, so that's the thing is like, are you going to actually allow people to kind of
yeah,
actualize?
totally. I know you're going to stand up for yourself to do it.
Yeah, you got to have both sides.
Totally. Yep.
So
100%.
it's like people do they think that people first is anti-business, or is it
Yeah.
like you
A
think
lot
they
of
that
business owners think it is, right? They think that if I come in there and talk about people first, they think that they've got to hand over the farm to their employees and they're never going to be able to, kind of hold anybody accountable, or that, they're going to spend a bunch more money on people and all of that. And that's not what people first is at all. Um, People first is about listening and caring, right? It's understanding that happy employees are profitable employees. And the things that make people happy are generally not money, and they're not the perks, and they're not the ping pong tables, and they're not the pizza lunches. It's that people have listened. Doesn't mean they get everything that they want, but they've been listened to, they're cared about, and they're developed into a role that makes them happy. That's people first. And that's what makes people like I feel like I teach business a lot about human behavior and motivation, which is people first, right? And then I teach people a lot about how to do business. And so it kind of goes both ways, and I think that that's part of what I do well is helping businesses understand what gets people out of bed in the morning and what makes people stay at companies when they have really awesome leadership that cares about them and includes them in the process and communicates and supports and cares. And here's the cool part is that for me, now working in with small businesses have the upper hand in this because all day long, corporate is just so huge that by default, employees are numbers.
mhm.
And it just is what it is. And it's kind of like the risk and legal piece that I talked about earlier. It just is what it is. You can't necessarily change that. But small businesses have a totally different flavor about what their working environment is like and what they can do with their employees and how they can treat them and what that culture looks like. Small businesses have the ability to do that all day long. And so when small business owners come to me and they think that they're kind of the underdogs for people and HR and talent and recruiting and all these kinds of things, it's like, stop. I'm not buying it. Like, I call BS on it. You can't tell me that that's how it's going to be, because you have the ability to be the best employer out there, which means that you get the best employees out there. And so, it's a very like really simple and easy equation for me. Um, and as soon as I help business owners understand that I'm not asking them to shell out millions of dollars to do ping pong tables and, $100,000 bonuses and things, that's when, they kind of breathe for a second and they're like, okay, I get it, right? If we have happy employees, they're going to be more profitable employees and they're going to care about what they're doing more. And that's going to translate to the customer experience. And in a world where customer experience is notated on every forum out there, we have every single human out there is a billboard, right? We read reviews on everything. We read them on restaurants, we really read them on service providers, we read them on um, all kinds of things, products on Amazon, right? Who doesn't look at all the reviews? And if you are not creating a really great customer experience through your very happy employees, it's going to be painfully obvious. And
Yeah.
so it's a pretty easy equation for me. But I just kind of have to work through that with business owners so they don't freak out that I said people first.
Well, I think it's the communication is your like secret sauce because I was a sociology major and I think a lot of times what happens is the corporate world thinks that's like foo-foo, like communication, sociology, psychology, philosophy, those are
No,
foo-foo things, I think. What they forget is like, your employee is a customer too, right? And
all day long.
and if you don't understand the idea of like concepts of sociology and communication and psychology, when you just turn off and you think your employee's a widget and they're just like they can just put them here and put them there and their
Yep,
feelings don't matter.
yep.
They're if they're happy doesn't matter. All that
Mm,
matters is the quarterly report and the stock price, and you can get a bond, whatever. It's
yeah.
like if you don't understand like why people were passionate, like when Steve Jobs was at Apple, when people like Robert Moog, built the Moog, and there were,
Mhm.
engineers that just went with him even when he wasn't making money
Yeah,
because they were passionate about building a synthesizer. And
right,
they joined him because he was doing something cutting edge. And so people do things because that law of attraction. If
right.
you create an environment where there's passion, the people will put the hours in. You don't have to
No,
mandate the overtime.
no,
They will
no.
do the overtime. They will do
Right.
it because they want to do it. They'll come up with ideas when you show that you listen. If you show that you never listen to anybody on the floor, the people on the floor, they might leave and go down to the next company and give it to them because they listened. It's like so the idea is like, listening skills is like a rare thing. I think a lot of
It
times you
is.
talk about communication, it's like if the boardroom only talks to people in the boardroom, then they don't really know what's going on.
They don't.
So, and they might be think they know what's going on because they get all these numbers. But like who's giving them the numbers?
Well, yeah. And data is great, right? We live in the age of data and data science. At the end of the day, we're still working with humans, and small businesses still have the bandwidth to be there for their humans. And in corporate, it's just harder just because there's so many. And so, and most of my small business owners adore their employees, right? So and most of them are already kind of in this model already. I mean, some of them are more people first than I would even recommend.
Yeah.
But that's why I love small businesses, because they get it and they love their people and they know that this little team of people that, it's like the little engine that could, right? That's what keeps them afloat is their people, and they know that. And it is so much fun.
Yeah, when you see some corporate models that they kind of create little entrepreneurial like like areas within their company
Yep.
that seem like a bunch of small
Yeah.
startups.
Mhm.
When they do it like that, then it
Yeah.
tends to work
Yeah.
because then you're able to divide it up enough that it still feels like authentic to the people involved, so they're willing to give you the ideas and they're willing to put the time in. But if once you devoid that, right, once you get rid of that, and people start feeling like, well, I just feel like a number. And anytime you make people feel like a number, then you're gonna get that result.
Totally.
It's like
Totally.
all the data science will prove it to you. Like, go check it out.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
it's just interesting by your journey that you kind of came full circle. Like you're in it and you're benefiting from like all the years you put into it. But then you're out of the box thinking. It allowed you to kind of put a new spin on something. Which is to me is like that's the genius of why people are creative. Because the creative person looks at something, so everybody looks at it, this, oh, you can't do anything with that. Right? But when the creative person says, oh, I can take this and I can put the spin on it, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I know you never saw it that way. Well, because
Yeah.
perception's everything. Like how you see something
Yeah.
and
It's your
is
reality.
different than how somebody else sees it. In philosophy class, Camus and Sartre, they were talking about this all the time. Maybe that's too foo-foo for people, but that's what happens. That's why you get what you're doing because you saw something. Other people probably saw it and said, "I didn't see that," but that's the magic. That's the muse. That's that's that creative spark, and that's why AI is not going to replace that because that's what we have as humans. I use AI as a tool, and I can use it, but
We
it
all
doesn't.
yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't
And we
replace.
all should be using it, right? Like
Yeah,
there's,
it's
I
crazy to
it's
use.
interesting that, talking about AI just for a second, like I have a lot of, kind of employees, right? That not on my team, but in business, right? That are like, oh gosh, AI is going to take my job. And I said, listen, AI is going to take the job of the people who don't figure out how to use it.
Yeah, you got to learn how to use it. It's like any
You got
tool.
to learn how to use it.
Like
Yes. It's a
in
tool.
like yeah, I mean, we use computers. People say, well, all the sound engineers gonna be gone if you use computers. That's not the case. There's still tons of sound engineers that use AI and use computers, right?
Yes.
So like computers give you a way. Now the thing is, like when I had to talk to this tech bro, and he was telling me the AI was gonna write the song. I said, well, yeah, AI can write the song, but it's not a song I want to listen to. So
No.
it's like you can use it to help you write a
Yes.
song, and
Yes.
there'll be people who use it like there are authors that are using it to write the whole book, but I don't know how many people are actually gonna buy that book. But the idea that you can you can get into it, but you gotta learn
Hmm.
like if you sample a song, you sample the whole song and just change the lyrics. Everybody knows that you were kind of lazy
Right.
and you just took something that was already out there and just threw
Yeah.
new lyrics on top of it,
I
right?
mean, it's the same thing if you look on any social media and you look at the stuff that was made by AI and the stuff that was written by a real human. It's vastly different content. And yes, AI has come a long way, but you can tell when somebody wrote something and when they didn't.
Yeah, and the human being is always going to be there. It's like
Mhm.
it's a reason like a business analyst in the insurance industry that learns how to do prompt engineering to make the workflow more effective.
Sure.
He's going to have that job rather than the guy says, "I hate AI. I don't want to learn anything about it." Instead of taking the 20 years of your life insurance experience and learning about the prompt engineering, the BA that learns the prompt engineering might take your job
Yes.
because you learned how to use it and you decide
Yes.
you don't want to do it. So that's the kind of what's going on.
Totally.
But
Totally.
yeah, it's like anything, it's like all the jobs for the people who were maintain the horse and buggies when the car came. Well, look how many jobs came when the car came. It's like people say, well, it's going to knock everybody out. Yeah, well, it knocked the guy doing the horseshoes
Yeah.
and the blacksmith
Yeah.
and the guys tending the horses. But then look at all the jobs for the mechanics and the tire repair places and
You
all
just
the
have
other
to
things.
learn the new tool.
Yeah, the new tool comes out there, and there's always a way to learn the new tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole man, AI isn't just AI. There's programmers behind the machine learning. There's a lot of
Totally.
work jobs in machine learning
Yes.
techniques, and you can relearn. And so there's a lot of stuff out there that's scary. in the world of automation, you see these robots and,
Mhm.
restaurant with no people in it,
Yeah.
a 7-Eleven with no people in it. You could get a little afraid of things, but then you could think about, like, there are opportunities.
Yeah.
And so it's like
100%.
as long as you realize that, like, the opportunity is now you might be able to have your own job
Right.
doing your own thing because these tools let you ramp up
Yes.
that you don't need a factory. You could have a 3D printer and
Mhm.
some AI bots, and you could do something that took 10, 15, 20 people to do.
Right.
So that's the difference. It's like you
Yeah.
start thinking out the box, right?
Yeah. We go right back to being creative and going outside the lines, right? That's all you gotta do.
It's scary, and any revolution in technology scares people because they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's the end." It's not the end; it's the beginning.
Absolutely.
So people want to reach you. They make an
Mhm.
appointment through your calendar. Is that how they
Yeah,
do
that's
that? The
that's the
link?
easiest way to chat with me, and I'm happy to have anyone, schedule something and just pick my brain. Like, it's not a sales thing, it's not anything else. Just, if anything's interesting that we've talked about today, just put yourself on my calendar and we'll chat. I love talking to people, and my brain is an open book. So, however you want to pick brains about people first, or being an entrepreneur, or leaving corporate, or any of those kinds of things, feel free.
I think that's great. I want everybody to know that's clickable. In the
Yes.
podcast description, we're just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And in the podcast description on those platforms, you'll be able to click on that Calendly link and it will go right there. It will be the same thing when we're on Apple and Spotify and iHeartRadio and Amazon and all the other places that we're going to be on by tomorrow. I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. I do appreciate the knowledge you were able to give to our audience today. And I think maybe people like open their eyes and start looking at
Yeah.
different ideas like fractional HR and some of the concepts you were talking about today is very, very interesting to me. And
Yeah.
I think other people find it interesting too. So thank you for being here
Yeah.
today and
Well, thank you
giving
for
us,
having me. It's super fun.
thank you. You have a
All
great
right.
night.
You too.